My husband was caught having an intimate lunch with his coworker at an upscale restaurant, holding hands and feeding each other dessert, but when I confronted him he said I'm allowed to have female friends, you're being controlling and insecure about normal friendships, so I hired a private investigator who discovered their weekend getaways and hotel receipts. The most painful moment came when Melissa ordered tiramisu for dessert. I watched my husband of 4 years feed her spoonfuls of the dessert while she laughed and playfully grabbed his wrist. The way they looked at each other, the natural chemistry between them, and the obvious comfort level they shared made it clear that this was not their first intimate lunch together. I took photos with my phone from across the restaurant, making sure to capture their hand-holding and the dessert feeding incident that had initially caught Rachel's attention. My hands were shaking as I documented my husband's betrayal, but I knew I needed evidence of what I was witnessing. After they finished their meal, I watched Christopher pay the check while Melissa touched his arm and leaned close to whisper something in his ear that made him smile widely. When they stood to leave, Christopher helped her with her coat, and they walked out of the restaurant with his hand on her waist. I waited several minutes before leaving the restaurant myself, then drove back to the clinic in a daze. I spent the rest of the afternoon trying to focus on my patients while processing what I'd witnessed. The intimate lunch I'd observed was undeniable evidence that Christopher was having an affair, and his casual lies about his working lunch proved that he was willing to deceive me about his relationship with Melissa. That evening, I decided to confront Christopher directly rather than letting him continue to lie to me. When he came home around 7 p.m., I asked him to sit down because I needed to discuss something important with him. "Christopher, I need to ask you about your lunch today," I said, keeping my voice calm despite the anger and hurt I was feeling. "Where did you go, and who were you with?" He looked slightly surprised by the direct question but answered casually, "Oh, just grabbed a quick sandwich with some colleagues to discuss the Morrison account. Nothing exciting." "Why do you ask?" The ease with which he lied to my face was almost more hurtful than the affair itself. I took out my phone and showed him the photos I'd taken at Meridian. "That's interesting, because I have pictures of you at Meridian having an intimate lunch with Melissa, holding hands and feeding each other dessert," I said. "That doesn't look like a business meeting to discuss the Morrison account." Christopher's face went white as he looked at the photos, and for a moment he seemed genuinely shocked that I'd caught him. Then his expression changed from surprise to defensiveness. "Samantha, this is exactly the kind of paranoid behavior that's been driving me crazy lately," he said, his tone becoming condescending. "I'm allowed to have female friends. You're being controlling and insecure about normal friendships." I stared at him in disbelief. "Christopher, you were holding hands and feeding each other dessert. That's not normal friendship behavior, and you know it." He rolled his eyes and continued with his dismissive attitude. "Melissa is a good friend and colleague who I enjoy spending time with. The fact that you're spying on me and taking pictures like some kind of private investigator shows that you have serious trust issues that you need to work on." "Trust issues?" I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. "You lied to me about where you were and who you were with. You told me you had a business lunch when you were clearly on a romantic date." Christopher shook his head as if I was being unreasonable. "You're completely overreacting to innocent behavior between friends. Melissa and I have a good working relationship, and sometimes we grab lunch to discuss cases. The fact that you're sexualizing normal social interactions says more about your insecurities than about my behavior." The gaslighting was breathtaking. Christopher was trying to make me question my own perception of what I'd clearly witnessed, and he was painting me as the problem for being upset about his obvious affair. "So you're telling me that holding hands